Hello and welcome to the 6th installment of Mobility Mondays. Today we're going to be covering a lot of the mobility that you need for the front rack movement because if you're at home, you know, the chances of you doing barbell work, even to the volume that you were doing it before, is not going to be as much. So when we go back and having to do high volume, fatigued level, cleans or front squats, all that stuff, it can increase your likelihood for little strains, nicks, and bumps. So my intent here today is to, improve that mobility that you need for the front rack position to decrease your injury so you don't have to see me. And we're just going to get started. We're going to start with the ankle, work our way upwards. If you have limited ankle mobility, it causes your lower back to compensate to keep you upright. And just a quick demonstration, I'm going to use this bench right here. And if I block my knees so my knees can't travel that way, and you have me do a squat, for me to keep my chest up, I have to arch my lower back a lot more, which is a mobility that I don't have. And then with load and repetition, then that can cause little tweaks in that area right there. And so that's where the importance of ankle mobility. A lot of people counter this by, using lifters, and that makes things a lot easier for them. But you can also be working on ankle mobility in the meantime. So the first one, the one I hammer down all the time, is going to be a calf kneel ankle dorsiflexion stretch with a lunge, like this. And as you see, my heels staying on the floor and my knees are traversing over my toes quite a good distance because I have pretty good ankle mobility on this side of my body. But I can still feel the stretch with my Achilles and the deep calf muscles. Try to make sure that your knees are going right over your toes and not going side to side. And then backing off there and then switching sides. So this one, my knee's not traveling as far over my toes just because this ankle's a little bit stiffer. As soon as I get to a point, my heel wants to come off the ground, and I don't want to do that. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of offloading by putting my hands on the ground, and so I'm able to lean my thigh more into the stretch without lifting my heel off of the ground. So if you just spend a minute at each position, I know a lot of times, like when you get early to the gym, you're just sitting at the bench or doing some foam rolling and stuff, like you can easily just do this stretch while you're chit-chatting with other people. And then that'll get you ready for deep squats. The next one is going to be the frog stretch. And this is going to be stretching out a lot of your hip and your groin muscles at the same time. And how you're going to do this is you're just going to go on your knees, go in a wide V, like so, and then you're just going to sit on your heels like this. Actually, the wider the better. So you're kind of like in the frog stance, just like this. Because that knee pointed out position is really important for wall balls or front squats or squat cleans, squat snatches. And even though this is a little bit exaggerated for most people, you want to have access to that range of motion when you need it. So just hold here for about a minute. Really try to drive your butt bones to the floor. while keeping your knees pointed out. So I actually felt that a lot more in my hip joints as opposed to the groin muscles in that one, and that's still really, really good. Next, we're working our way up, and now we're going to go on to the trunk area. And we're going to start off with the cat camels. And as simple as this one is, it's pretty calming as well. And what it does is it activates the deep spinal muscles that have been pretty dormant since you started your day today. And so you're just going to start off with arching your back towards the ceiling like this. Holding that for about 5 seconds. And then arching down. Trying to drive your sternum towards the floor. And what I'm talking about is if you imagine your sternum right here, this little point right here where the rib cage kind of meets, that's going to be the focal point. Think of Iron Man's core center. That's what we're going to be trying to drive to the floor. So do about 5 of these. 5 second holds at the top. Try to push the ground away from you. And then 5 seconds at the bottom. And just repeat that a few more times. And one more. So now that we've activated those muscles, we're going to do another one that will also be stretching out your lats. And this one I call the prayer stretch, and you're going to need a small bench like this. But you can also use, a low couch, a chair, something like that. And I'm just going to use a PVC, but honestly it's not necessary, and if you have an umbrella or a broom at home, it can also replicate a PVC. And just going to be on your knees, elbow on the bench like this. And you're just going to rock backwards like so. My lats are pretty tight today, so I'm really feeling this in my lats. But to get more of a lat stretch, you're actually going to arch your back like that scaredy cat position that we were just working on. So this already stretches out the lat fibers from where they attach. And then you're going to rock backwards one more time. Hold for about 30 seconds with this one. And then moving right along, now we're going to get to the shoulder part. And the shoulder mobility that you need for the front rack position is going to be that external rotation. So classically, external rotation can be defined as, this motion, or it's going to be this one. So when you're trying to pitch a baseball, this motion is called external rotation. We kind of covered that a little bit last week. But in the front rack, this position, we're just going to move it to in front of you. So it's still an external rotation, but it slackens and tightens different aspects of your joint capsule. And you can test yourself by having an imaginary front rack, keeping your elbows still, and just pushing and trying to push your fists away from each other this way. So doing it from the side view. Try to keep your push your elbows inwards, and then your fists are going to be going outwards like this. And I really like to use a broom or a PVC pipe for this one, just because, so I'm going to try to squeeze my pecs, keep my elbows tight, and then I can walk away with my hands slowly. So I'm going to be able to maintain that stretch that I want, and eventually try to really get far away like this, and then just holding this position like this. So if we have a problem side, and for this demonstration, my right side is actually a little bit more limited. Just going to use your palm, put the PVC pipe on your palm. You're going to hold this position here where your elbow is on the tabletop, and then you're going to use this arm to kind of drive it outwards like this. So an interesting thing that you guys might feel with this one is a little bit of stress on the middle part of your elbow, and that is like the area where, you know, we call it golfer's elbow, and this is one of the main things that can aggravate that position, is because if you don't have that external rotation range of motion, your elbow has to go through more stress. It has to bend more this way to get you in that same front rack position that you need. So if that makes sense, if I don't have that external rotation where I can go out here, my elbow has to be able to go this way more, and it stresses out the flexors of your forearms. And so if we have golfer's elbow, we try to target, you know, your thoracic or your shoulder, because they could be contributing to that area right there. And I actually like to do this one on the bench as well, like right after that prayer position, just to, you know, stabilize the elbow and control all the variables. And then I can walk my hands outwards, like so, lean one way versus the other, so I can drive to the my right or drive to the left, and then holding that position, and you will be feeling a lot of stretch in the front part of your shoulder capsule. We've got a few more to go over. The next one is another shoulder one. We call it the Apley's stretch, but it's also a test. So simple enough, you're going to reach upwards with one arm, and then you're going to reach behind your back with the other arm. And typically we would measure the distance between your thumb and one of the lowest fingers that you have on the top side, and find that gap in between both. So as you can see from the side view, I have a pretty big gap in between my thumb and my middle finger here. And then when I switch sides, I feel like that gap is a little bit more narrow, and I feel like my fingers are closer to each other. And we would measure that, and then we would find a discrepancy. When I did this way, I felt like this arm was really limiting my internal rotation. And that's the stretch itself, is just holding that position here. And that's how you retest it too. If you're improving that range of motion, you can retest that range of motion and have someone measure behind you, or you can just take a picture, you know, like a timed selfie or something. And let's see, still should be on this call. Carrie, give me a few more minutes, please. Similarly, you can use a towel or a PVC pipe or a broom for this Apley stretch like this. And then depending on which one is more limited, like I said, this bottom arm is more limited, so I can actually pull this upwards a little bit more like this. And just hold that. And it's a very intense stretch, so I'm actually going to decrease the intensity, like so. And just hold that with the help of this PVC pipe. So after 2 to 4 weeks of working on that myself, I will retest, and then I should see a pretty good improvement in my range of motion for my shoulders. So last two, now have your elbows straight. We're going to move on to the wrist now. This one is really important to have wrist extension, which is going to be your fingers driving towards you, making sure all your fingers are straight, and you're going to be stretching out all those forearm muscles and your finger muscles. Typically, your stronger side is going to be tighter, just because that side has a stronger grip, and that muscle's been used. Those muscles have been used more in your lifetime, so they're going to be a little bit tighter. And as I alluded to in my post, if you have decreased thoracic mobility, you can add more stress to your wrist, and that's because if you're not able to keep your chest up because you don't have that mobility, something's got to give. So it's going to be your wrist having to extend more to keep that weight up. So a lot of times you'll see people when they have really heavy weight and they're falling forward, the wrist is starting to cave in this way as well, but that's because they don't have enough range of motion in the wrist and it's going to fall forward. So they really all just work together, and it's like a chain. So if you have a weak link in your chain, the weakest link is going to be the one that's going to be barking at you. And lastly, so you do that wrist stretch for the forearm muscles, and then we're going to do a wrist mobility exercise for the joint itself, and it's going to be a similar concept to the ankle, dorsiflexion stretch. And now it's going to be your wrist, making sure your hands are flat on the ground like this. Keep your elbows straight, and then you're just going to lunge forward and hold that stretch. And what I like to do is I like to use the other hand and choke it right at the wrist joint itself to kind of plant it firmly on the ground, and I'm going to lunge forward and hold that stretch for about 30 seconds. And if you do it right, you might feel it in the forearm muscles and the wrist joint itself as well. So once again, making sure that your head is flat on the ground, choke up right at the wrist joint where your forearm bones meet your wrist, and then you're going to use your body weight to lunge forward, keeping your palm flat on the ground the whole time. Hold that for 30 seconds, and that will be a good one for the wrist. And now you're all warmed up to do some front squats and squat cleans. All right, thanks for watching this recording. If you guys need any further explanation, just rewind the tape, or feel free to message us, and I'll try to clarify some things and give you guys the answers as best as I can. See you guys next week.